Welcome. What you are about to watch is not science fiction, and it is not folklore. It is a serious investigation into one of history's most compelling unresolved questions: the mystery of the Tarim Basin Mummies, Caucasian mummies found in China's desert, rewriting the Silk Road story. Across the world, in universities, research institutes, and field excavations, serious scholars are wrestling with evidence that does not fit the accepted story. Evidence that has been documented, measured, and peer-reviewed, and that still has no satisfying conventional explanation. We are going to look at that evidence carefully, without prejudice in either direction, not dismissing what is extraordinary, but not accepting it without scrutiny either. The truth, as always, is in the details. In the 1970s and 1980s, archaeologists working in the Tarim Basin, a vast, hyperarid desert in the Xinjiang region of western China, began discovering mummies. Not Egyptian-style artificially preserved mummies, but naturally preserved bodies, dried by the extreme aridity of the Taklamakan Desert, whose name in Uyghur is often translated as "you go in and you don't come out." These mummies were several thousand years old, and they had auburn hair, light skin, and facial features that were unmistakably Caucasian, not East Asian, not Mongolian, not Central Asian in any previously documented sense. The mummies of the Tarim Basin looked like they had come from Bronze Age Europe and somehow arrived in Western China. The most famous individual is a woman discovered at a site called Cherchen, or Qiemo, dated to approximately 1000 BCE. She is known as the Beauty of Loulan, or the Loulan Beauty, after a different mummy from the same general region and period. She stands 180 centimeters tall, nearly 6 feet, had long auburn hair, and was buried in a vividly colored tartan-patterned woolen garment. Her clothing is chemically and technically similar to Celtic and Central European Bronze Age textiles of the same period. Other Tarim mummies have been found with horses, oxen, and equipment that indicates a pastoral nomadic lifestyle clearly connected to the steppe culture of the Eurasian grasslands. These people came from somewhere far to the west, and they arrived in western China more than 1,000 years before the established history of the Silk Road begins. For decades, the origin of the Tarim mummies was politically sensitive in China, where the question of who was in Xinjiang first has contemporary implications for the status of the Uyghur people. Chinese scholars sometimes downplayed or complicated the Western ancestry of the mummies. Western archaeologists sometimes overclaimed the significance of the Caucasian appearance. In 2021, a major ancient DNA study published in Nature finally resolved the biological question. The Tarim mummies are not descended from any known ancient population. They are the last survivors of an extremely ancient lineage of ancient North Eurasians who arrived in the Tarim Basin in extreme isolation and stayed there. They came from neither east nor west. They came from a population that was already ancient when the first cities were being built in Mesopotamia. This is where our investigation begins. Stay with us, because the further we go into the evidence, the more extraordinary it becomes. The story you think you know is only the surface. Beneath it lies something far more remarkable. Let us begin. Before we go further, if you are finding this investigation compelling, please take a moment right now to like this video, drop a comment below with your thoughts, and share it with someone who loves a good historical mystery. If you are watching on YouTube, hit subscribe and tap the bell icon so you never miss a new episode. If you found us through Facebook, tap follow on our page. It takes just a few seconds, and it genuinely helps us keep making these documentaries. Now, let us get back to the investigation. Before we examine the specific evidence, we need to step back and understand the context. This case does not exist in isolation. It sits within the broader phenomenon of lost civilizations, and to properly evaluate what we are looking at, we need to understand the broader picture that surrounds it. The ocean has a long memory. As the last ice age ended around 12,000 years ago, sea levels worldwide rose by more than 120 meters, enough to drown entire coastal civilizations that may have flourished along shorelines that no longer exist. The continental shelves that now lie submerged beneath shallow coastal seas were once habitable land. River deltas, bays, and estuaries that today lie underwater were once the most attractive real estate on Earth. Rich in resources, temperate in climate, and accessible by sea. If ancient peoples built their settlements where resources were most abundant, then much of the archaeological record of early civilization may be sitting on the ocean floor, invisible to conventional excavation. This is not speculation. Marine archaeologists have already found submerged ruins at dozens of locations worldwide, off the coasts of India, Japan, Cuba, and the Mediterranean islands. In some cases, these structures are clearly artificial: stone walls, carved steps, and rectilinear platforms that could not have formed naturally. The academic debate is not whether these structures exist, but what they mean. Were they built by unknown pre-flood cultures, or were they coastal settlements of known civilizations gradually abandoned as waters rose? The answer, in many cases, remains open. What oral traditions add to this picture is equally significant. Cultures living on or near the sea throughout the tropics and subtropics carry remarkably consistent flood narratives, stories of a great inundation that drowned an earlier world. These are not borrowed from one another through colonial contact. They predate European exploration. They appear to be independent memories of a shared catastrophe, the end of the last ice age, when the world coastlines changed forever and entire ways of life were drowned. The civilizations that built on those shores, if they existed, vanished beneath the waves. This context matters because it tells us something important. What we are about to investigate is not an isolated curiosity. It is part of a pattern that researchers in multiple fields have been independently documenting for decades. And patterns, in science, demand explanation. With that foundation in place, let us now turn to the specific case at hand. Now we reach the heart of the matter. The core evidence surrounding the Tarim Basin Mummies, Caucasian mummies found in China's desert, rewriting the Silk Road story, is more extensive, more verified, and more troubling for conventional explanations than most people realize. Let us walk through it systematically, fact by fact, and allow the evidence to speak for itself. We are not going to speculate here. Every point that follows is documented in peer-reviewed publications, official archaeological records, or government archives that are publicly accessible. The question is not whether these facts are real. The question is what they mean. Consider this first extraordinary detail. The Tarim Basin is a closed basin in what is now the Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region of China, bordered by the Cherchen Mountains to the north, the Kunlun Mountains to the south, and the Pamirs to the west. Its center is the Taklamakan Desert, one of the world's largest and most arid deserts. The extreme aridity, less than 10 mm of annual rainfall in much of the basin, combined with high salinity soils, has created ideal natural mummification conditions that have preserved organic materials of extraordinary delicacy, including textiles, plant foods, leather goods, wooden objects, and human remains. This single data point, if taken in isolation, might be set aside. Anomalies happen, instruments malfunction, researchers make mistakes. But as we continue, you will see that this is not an isolated anomaly. It is part of a consistent and documented pattern. But that is only the beginning. Researchers also discovered more than 500 mummies have been discovered in the Tarim Basin since the early 20th century, when Sven Hedin and Aurel Stein first encountered some burials during their explorations of Central Asia. The mummies span a period from approximately 2000 BCE to 800 C, with the largest and best preserved clusters dated to 800-1000 BCE. The most famous include the Tarim Beauty from Loulan, approximately 800 BCE, the Cherchen Man, approximately 1000 BCE, about 2 meters tall with brown hair, and the witches of Sabeshi, approximately 400-200 BCE, distinguished by their tall conical hats. Now, a skeptic might propose an alternative explanation for this, and that is entirely reasonable. We should always test alternative explanations before accepting extraordinary ones. The problem is that the alternative explanations, when examined carefully, create more problems than they solve. The The mystery deepens when we examine. The textiles found with the Tarim mummies are among the most significant archaeological finds for the study of prehistoric textile technology. The fabrics include twill weave, plaid patterns, and striped patterns in colors including red, blue, yellow, and brown, patterns and techniques characteristic of Bronze Age European and Central Asian textile traditions. Wool from the Tarim mummies' clothing has been chemically analyzed and found to be from domestic sheep, consistent with breeds known from Bronze Age Central Asia and Europe. The sophistication of the weaving technology suggests that the Tarim people were part of a broader textile tradition extending across the Eurasian steppe. This is where the conventional account begins to strain. Each individual fact might be dismissed or minimized in isolation. But the cumulative weight of the evidence is another matter entirely. Perhaps most remarkable of all, the 2021 Nature paper by Vagheesh Narasimhan and colleagues published the first comprehensive ancient DNA analysis of Tarim mummies. The results were surprising. Rather than showing ancestry from known Western or Eastern Eurasian populations, the Tarim mummies showed almost exclusively ancestry from an ancient population called Ancient North Eurasians, AIN, a population ancestral to both West-Eastern Eurasian populations and Native Americans, but not strongly associated with any living population in East Asia or Central Asia. The Tarim mummies' genome is consistent with a population that has been isolated in the Tarim Basin since approximately 9000 BCE, having arrived there during the last ice age and remained genetically isolated for thousands of years. Researchers who have examined this evidence have described it as genuinely difficult to explain within the accepted framework. These are not fringe commentators. They are credentialed academics publishing in mainstream journals, raising questions that the field has not yet satisfactorily answered. Then there is the matter of the physical appearance of the Tarim mummies. Light skin, auburn or red hair, tall stature, is consistent with their ancient North Eurasian ancestry. Since this population is ancestral to populations that later developed light skin and hair pigmentation as adaptations to high-latitude environment (NTS), the fact that the Tarim people maintained these physical characteristics in Central Asia is consistent with the genetic evidence for long isolation and lack of admixture with neighboring populations. Their physical appearance does not indicate that they were European in any ethnic or cultural sense. Rather, they represent a distinct, ancient population that happened to share some physical characteristics with later Western Eurasian populations because of shared ancient ancestry. What makes this particularly significant is its independence from the previous points. This is not a case of one theory requiring another. These are separate lines of evidence converging on the same uncomfortable conclusion. Adding to the enigma is this finding: the material culture of the Tarim mummies includes objects that provide information about their economy and social life. Chariot wheels and harnesses found at some sites indicate they kept horses. Cattle and sheep bones are ubiquitous, indicating a pastoral economy. Wheat, millet, and other plant foods found in burial contexts indicate some agricultural activity. Bronze tools and weapons of Central Asian steppe type are present at later sites. The overall cultural profile is consistent with a Bronze Age agripastoral nomadic society with strong connections to the Eurasian steppe culture, though the DNA suggests this culture was independently developed by a long-isolated indigenous populate, ion rather than imported by immigrant steppe peoples. Taken together, these facts form a pattern that cannot be explained by coincidence, misidentification, or methodological error. Each piece of evidence has been examined by skeptics. Each has been subjected to alternative explanations. And in each case, the alternative explanation falls short of accounting for everything that has been documented. We are left with a body of evidence that demands explanation and an accepted narrative that does not provide one. This is where serious inquiry begins. Now that we have established the evidence, we need to examine the theories that researchers have proposed to explain the Tarim Basin Mummies, Caucasian mummies found in China's desert, rewriting the Silk Road story. This is where the debate becomes most intense, because the theories reflect not just different interpretations of the same evidence, but fundamentally different assumptions about what is possible and what the past looked like. Understanding these theories is not just an academic exercise. Each one has been championed by serious researchers with genuine credentials, and each one captures something that the others miss. The truth, if it is ever established, will likely draw on elements of several. The first major explanation proposed by researchers holds that the ancient isolation theory, supported by the 2021 DNA study, holds that the Tarim mummies descended from an ancient North Eurasian population that arrived in the Tarim Basin approximately 9000 BCE, during or shortly after the last glacial maximum, and remained in genetic isolation thereafter. Their material culture, pastoral economy, textile technology, horse use, was independently developed or adopted through cultural contact without significant genetic admixture. This theory challenges the simplistic notion that the Bronze Age Tarim people were Western migrants, and instead places them as a deeply indigenous Central Asian population with an extremely ancient lineage. This interpretation has significant academic support and is backed by substantial evidence, but it is not without problems. Critics point out that it requires assumptions that go beyond what the evidence strictly supports, and that key predictions of this theory have not been confirmed by subsequent research. It remains contested, and the contest is productive. A rival school of thought argues that the Proto-Indo-European Cherchen theory, popular before the 2021 DNA results, proposed that the Tarim mummies were Cherchenians, speakers of the Cherchen branch of the Indo-European language family, whose language is attested in manuscripts from the Tarim Basin dating to approximately 500–900 CE. Under this model, the Tarim mummies represented the physical ancestors of the historical Cherchen people, who had migrated from the Pontic-Caspian steppe with the Indo-European expansion. The 2021 DNA results showed that the Bronze Age Tarim mummies do not have significant steppe ancestry, complicating this theory, though the relationship between the Bronze Age mummies and the historical Cherchenians remains to be clarified. This theory is controversial, and deliberately so. Its proponents argue that the evidence demands an explanation outside the conventional framework. Critics counter that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and that the evidence presented, while suggestive, does not yet meet that standard. The debate continues in peer-reviewed literature. Perhaps the most unconventional theory suggests that the multiple migration theory proposes that the Tarim Basin was populated by multiple migrations from different directions at different times, with the ancient North Eurasian population being the earliest layer, followed by later arrivals from the steppe, who may have brought Indo-European languages, and still later by East Asian populations. Under this model, the Bronze Age mummies represent the earliest phase, while the historical Cherchen manuscripts represent a later cultural linguistic layer that may not correspond to the same biological population. This theory accommodates both the DNA evidence for extreme Bronze Age isolation and the later genetic admixture that is visible in later Tarim Basin populations. What is striking about this debate is not merely that experts disagree. That is normal and healthy in science. What is striking is the quality of the disagreement. Serious researchers, working from the same body of evidence, reaching genuinely different conclusions. That level of fundamental disagreement, when it persists over decades, is a signal that something important has not yet been understood. The question is not which of these theories is right. The question is whether any of them is right, or whether the truth is something that none of the current frameworks has yet been able to capture. The case surrounding the Tarim Basin Mummies, Caucasian mummies found in China's desert. Rewriting the Silk Road story does not rest on speculation alone. What distinguishes this investigation from pure mythology is the existence of documented, physical, verifiable evidence, material that has been examined by credentialed researchers and whose authenticity is not seriously disputed. What is disputed is its interpretation. Let us review the most significant documented evidence as objectively as possible. We are not going to cherry-pick the data that supports a preferred conclusion. We are going to lay out what exists and let you draw your own assessment. Physical evidence supporting this account includes the ancient DNA results from the 2021 Nature study are the central evidence resolving the question of the Tarim Mummies' ancestry. Genome-wide data from 13 Bronze Age Tarim mummies showed nearly 100% ancient North Eurasian (AIN) ancestry with minimal admixture from neighboring East Asian, South Asian, or Western Eurasian populations. The ANE population is ancestral to many living groups, but is not itself represented as a significant component in any living population. The genetic isolation of the Tarim mummies implies that they were a remnant population of this ancient lineage that survived in the Tarim Basin while being replaced by agriculturalists and pastoralists elsewhere in Eurasia. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. Investigators have documented. The textile evidence provides material cultural data independent of the DNA. Chemical analysis of dye compounds in the textiles has identified ochre, iron oxide, woad, a blue dye, and various organic dyes consistent with steppe or Central Eurasian sources rather than Chinese or South Asian sources. The weaving patterns, twill weave in plaid configurations, are structurally identical to Bronze Age textiles from the Hallstatt culture of Central Europe, approximately 800–400 BCE, and the Cherchen textiles predate these European examples, suggesting that the textile tradition was not derived from Europe, but was a common Eurasian practice that independently appeared in both regions. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. On-site analysis revealed radiocarbon dating of the mummies and their associated organic materials provides a consistent chronological framework that places the main burial groups between 2000 and 800 BCE, predating the conventional beginning of the Silk Road, approximately 100 BCE under the Han Dynasty, by more than a millennium. The presence of people with distinctive cultural material in the Tarim Basin more than 1000 years before the historical Silk Road suggests that east-west connectivity across Central Asia began much earlier than previously recognized, and that the Silk Road formalized and expanded a network of contacts that had existed for thousands of years. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. Each individual piece of evidence might, in principle, be explained away. A single anomalous artifact might be misidentified. A single anomalous date might reflect contamination. A single anomalous eyewitness account might reflect misperception. The question is whether all of the evidence can be explained away, and whether the explanations required are more or less plausible than the evidence itself. When multiple independent lines of inquiry converge on the same conclusion, that convergence is the most powerful signal in empirical science. And that is exactly what we are seeing here. We have examined the history, the evidence, and the theories surrounding the Tarim Basin Mummies, Caucasian mummies found in China's desert, rewriting the Silk Road story. Now, we need to ask the question that is sometimes overlooked in discussions of ancient mysteries. Why does this matter? What does it mean for us today? It would be easy to file this away as an interesting historical curiosity, a puzzle from a distant past with no bearing on our present lives. That would be a fundamental mistake. The questions raised by this case touch on issues that are directly relevant to who we are, where we came from, and what the human story actually looks like before the period covered by conventional history. The Tarim mummies are displayed in the Xinjiang Museum in Urumqi, where they have been a major attraction for both Chinese and international visitors. The political sensitivity of the mummies in the context of Chinese government policies toward the Uyghur people of Xinjiang has complicated both their display and the international research on them. In recent years, Chinese authorities have restricted access to the mummies for foreign researchers, and some previously cooperative research arrangements have been terminated. The 2021 Nature DNA study, which was co-authored by Chinese researchers, was conducted under a framework of scientific collaboration that has since become more restricted. The finding that the Tarim mummies represent a deeply isolated ancient North Eurasian population, rather than westward migrants from Europe or eastward migrants from Central Asia, has added a new chapter to the story of human migration across Eurasia. It suggests that the Bronze Age Eurasian world was more complex and populous than previously recognized, with isolated pockets of ancient populations surviving in remote refugia long after the populations they were separated from had merged and diversified. Understanding the full picture of human population history in Central Asia requires integrating the Tarim mummies story with the broader pattern of Bronze Age migrations, trade networks, and cultural exchange across the continent. Furthermore, the tools available to investigate these questions are advancing rapidly. Satellite imaging, ground-penetrating radar, ancient DNA analysis, isotopic tracing, and deep-sea sonar are all providing capabilities that previous generations of researchers could only dream of. Cases that were genuinely unresolvable 10 years ago are now open to new analysis, and the findings, consistently, are expanding rather than contracting the mystery. The investigation continues. New discoveries are being made. New analyses are being published. New voices are entering the conversation from disciplines that were not previously part of the discussion. The answers, when they come, and they will come, will not merely solve a historical puzzle. They will force a fundamental revision of assumptions that underpin our entire understanding of human history and human potential. We have now walked through the complete case of the Tarim Basin Mummies, Caucasian mummies found in China's desert, rewriting the Silk Road story from the Historica El Record through the physical evidence, across the competing theories, and into the modern significance of what remains unresolved. What the story of Tarim mummies ultimately reveals is not just a historical puzzle. It is a mirror. It reflects our assumptions back at us, our assumptions about what ancient people were capable of, about how knowledge is gained and lost across the centuries, and about the relationship between what we know and what we merely think we know. The evidence presented in this documentary is real. The questions it raises are genuine. The debate among researchers is ongoing, and that is healthy. Science is not a set of conclusions. It is a process, and the process requires that we remain open to evidence that challenges what we thought we knew, however uncomfortable that challenge might be. If you came to this documentary as a skeptic, we hope the evidence gave you something to think about. If you came as a true believer, we hope the critical examination gave you a more nuanced picture. The truth, as always, lies in the evidence, not in what we want to be true. Thank you for watching. If this investigation sparked your curiosity, please help us reach more people. If you are watching on YouTube, subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new documentary. If you are watching on Facebook, tap the follow button on our page to stay connected. We publish new documentaries every week, covering the full range of historical mysteries that the mainstream has not yet adequately explained. Leave a comment telling us which case you want us to investigate next. The conversation continues. The investigation never ends.